On the night I celebrated our love, she told her friend I was just her backup plan. So I let her believe I didn't know, and then quietly took everything she was building away from her. I was 31, and at that time, I truly believed I had my life lined up the way I'd always wanted. I had spent years building my consulting business from the ground up, working hard every day to get to where I was. I owned a downtown condo, fully paid off, bought with my own money before I even met her. I thought I was in a strong, stable relationship. My fiancée and I had been together for 3 years. She worked in marketing at a tech startup, and from the outside we looked like a couple on the rise. We had a wedding date booked for the next spring, the venue reserved, and a ring that had taken me weeks to pick out. Everything felt right. It looked like the future was ours. That evening was supposed to be special, our 3rd anniversary. I'd spent the entire afternoon preparing a romantic dinner with her favorite dishes. I set the table, lit candles all around the apartment, and opened an expensive bottle of wine we'd been saving. Everything was set. Just before dinner, she had her best friend come over for a drink. It was something they often did before big nights, a kind of mini celebration. I thought nothing of it. While they laughed together, I stayed in the kitchen, putting final touches on the food and making sure everything was just right. I was lighting the last few candles when I heard the sliding glass door open. They stepped out onto the balcony, still chatting and laughing. The door was left slightly open, so their voices carried clearly into the apartment. At first, I didn't pay much attention. It just sounded like 2 friends talking. But then, the conversation shifted. Her friend asked her about me, about our relationship, and about the wedding plans. What she said next felt like someone had poured ice water directly into my chest. She whispered, "He's just my backup plan. I'll leave once I feel more secure." Then I heard the clink of their wine glasses, like they were toasting to that thought. I froze. The lighter was still in my hand, flames still burning. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just stood there as everything I thought I knew about our relationship shattered quietly in that moment. I had pictured a life with her. I thought we were building something real together. But now, I knew I was just a temporary solution to her problems. A placeholder until something better came along. I felt like a fool, but I didn't say anything. Not then. I blew out the lighter, took a deep breath, and finished lighting the candles with a steady hand. When they came back inside, I pretended nothing happened. I smiled, served dinner, and sat across from her as if everything was normal. We talked about our day, the wedding, our future. She smiled at me like she always did, and I smiled back, even though my mind was already racing. That night, after she fell asleep beside me, I stared up at the ceiling for hours. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. In that moment I was thinking, planning. If she was going to treat me like a backup plan, then she was going to learn what it meant to be left with nothing. Over the next few days, I started looking at things differently. I noticed how she rarely contributed to the bills or household costs, even though she had a good job. I noticed how she had been spending more time networking, coming home late after work events. I noticed how she talked less and less about her startup's progress, and more about wanting a bigger wedding, more guests, a fancier venue, expensive details. She was trying to build security for herself, but it was clear she didn't plan for me to be a part of that security forever. So I started planning too. I didn't react. I didn't confront her. I went quiet. First, I talked to a lawyer. We weren't married yet, so it wasn't about divorce. It was about understanding my legal rights. Thankfully, most of our big assets were in my name: the condo, the car, the accounts. The wedding deposits were shared, but they were manageable. I was prepared to cut my losses there if needed. Then I started collecting information. I watched how she spent her money. I paid attention to what she contributed at home. I made notes of what she said about work, her future, her goals. I opened a new bank account at a separate bank and slowly moved some of my savings over. Not to hide it, just to protect it. I made sure everything was in my name or locked away in a place she couldn't access. She didn't notice a thing. She thought everything was the same. Meanwhile, I was carefully pulling myself away from her. Financially, mentally, emotionally. Then I got a bit more strategic. I knew she was looking for a better job. She had started taking private phone calls, scheduling lunches that she never talked about, leaving her laptop open with tabs about job openings. She never bothered to hide it. She thought she was untouchable. I didn't do anything cruel or illegal. I simply used the information I had. I had friends across the industry because of my work. I slipped small comments into the right conversations, raised questions about her company's stability, her experience, her plans. Nothing aggressive, just seeds of doubt that could grow on their own. At home, I shifted my tone. I was supportive but subtle. When she talked about her career goals, I'd ask gentle questions. Is that really what you want? Or what happens if that startup doesn't go public? When she mentioned networking events, I'd say I was worried she was burning herself out. Everything sounded kind, caring, but it all planted uncertainty in her mind. She thought I was looking out for her. In reality, I was making sure she'd have nowhere else to turn when her plans fell apart. The turning point came when her friend reached out. It was about 2 weeks after that balcony night. She called me out of the blue, sounding nervous. She said my fiancé had been acting strange, calling her constantly, saying something felt wrong, but she couldn't figure out what. She thought something had happened between us, or that something was going on at work. I told her everything seemed fine on my end. I said she'd been a bit stressed lately, but nothing out of the ordinary. I could hear the worry in her friend's voice. She knew something was off, but she had no idea that I already knew everything, and that I was behind the shift her friend was feeling. That night, my fiancée came home more affectionate than she had been in a long time. She sat close to me on the couch, held my hand, told me how grateful she was to have me in her life. She said she'd been thinking about our future a lot lately, said she knew how lucky she was. I held her, smiled back, and told her I felt the same way. Deep down, I was thinking how perfectly everything was falling into place. She had no idea that the life she thought she was building was already crumbling beneath her, and that I was the one quietly pulling each brick loose. The weeks that followed were like watching a puzzle come apart, one piece at a time, except she didn't realize I was the one rearranging the edges. Her startup delayed their public launch again, and she seemed rattled. The confidence she once wore like a jacket started to slip. She talked less about big plans and more about how uncertain everything felt. The companies she had interviewed with all passed on her, and she described the meetings as strange, like the interviewers had already made up their minds before she walked in. I listened carefully, nodded when she vented, and gave her reassuring smiles, all while knowing it was my quiet whispers through industry friends that had built those walls around her. And just as I expected, she began spending more time at home. She started pitching in with groceries and utilities without me asking. She suggested we scale back the wedding to save money. Maybe something smaller, more practical. I told her that was a wonderful idea. She even offered to take over the planning herself, wanting to cut costs where she could. I let her think it was all her decision. In reality, she was simply reacting to the world I had designed around her. Then came another moment I won't forget. I overheard her on the phone with her best friend again. Only this time, she wasn't celebrating anything. She was nervous, unsure. She told her friend that she might have been wrong about me, that maybe she'd been so focused on her career, on her freedom, that she'd overlooked how rare it was to have someone steady, loyal, and supportive. Her friend seemed caught off guard, reminding her of their old talks, of independence, of keeping options open. But my fiancé was different now. She said those ideas had seemed smart at the time, but now they just felt foolish. And for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But that sympathy didn't last long, because I knew that what she was feeling now wasn't love or loyalty. It was dependence. It was survival. She was slowly letting go of her backup plans because she realized they didn't exist anymore. 3 months after that anniversary dinner, everything had shifted. She was no longer the same woman who had sat on that balcony and said I was just a stepping stone. She had become the perfect partner, helpful, grateful, committed. She talked about our marriage with real excitement now. Her startup had finally collapsed, and she took a lower-paying job at a traditional company just to stay afloat. Her dreams of financial freedom were gone. Her friend had pulled away, clearly uncomfortable with the new version of her, the one who had given up everything she once valued for stability. I had won, but winning wasn't enough. I needed her to know exactly why she lost. I chose a quiet Sunday morning to say it all. She had made us breakfast, smiled at me over coffee, still trying to be the supportive partner she thought I wanted. I looked at her calmly and said there was something I needed to share, something important. She went still instantly, thinking I might be calling off the engagement. I told her I knew everything. I told her I'd heard every word she said on that balcony, how she called me her backup plan, how she said she'd leave when she felt secure. I repeated the words back to her exactly as I had heard them. Her face went pale, then red, then ashen. She tried to deny it at first, tried to laugh it off as a joke taken out of context. But I didn't let her interrupt. I spoke calmly, clearly. I explained that from that night on, I'd spent months quietly taking her world apart. I told her about the bank accounts, the legal conversations, the comments I dropped to industry contacts, the little things I said at home to chip away at her confidence. Everything. By the time I finished, she was crying. Not the soft, delicate tears that ask for comfort, but the heavy, ugly kind that come from real panic. She asked me if I was leaving her. I said I hadn't decided yet. She begged me to understand, said she didn't mean it, that it was just fear talking. She claimed she'd been confused about commitment, that she'd never truly wanted to leave, even before her job fell apart. She swore she loved me. I looked at her without emotion and asked a simple question. If your startup had succeeded, if you had gotten that big job offer you wanted, would you still be here with me? She didn't answer. She couldn't. And that silence told me everything. I gave her a choice. She could leave immediately with whatever money was in her personal account and whatever she could carry. Or she could stay, but things would be different. If she stayed, everything would be transparent. No more secret plans. No more separate accounts. Every big decision would be made together. She would contribute equally, regardless of what she made. And she would have to earn back my trust one action at a time. No more words, only proof. She chose to stay. That was 6 months ago. And we're still living together, though our relationship now feels like something caught between a partnership and a lesson. She tries hard every day, wakes up early, helps with everything, plans every step around me. But we both know it's not love that drives her. It's fear. It's the cold understanding that I hold all the cards now. Her friend doesn't speak to her anymore. I think she can't stand seeing what's become of someone who used to talk about freedom and power but now lives in quiet dependence. As for me, I haven't decided if I'll ever marry her. The engagement ring still sits in its box in the back of my drawer. Every few weeks, she asks about wedding planning. And every time, I tell her we're not ready yet. She nods, grateful that I haven't ended it. She has no idea that I already did. The moment she said I was just her backup plan. People sometimes ask me if I feel guilty for what I did. And my answer is simple. No. She made a choice. She looked at someone who loved her and saw a safety net, not a partner. So I made sure she'd never be able to use me again. I gave her everything she said she wanted. Security, a home, a future. And then I locked that future in place so tightly that now she can't escape it, even if she tries. She wanted a backup plan. Now she's living in one with no way out. And that, to me, is justice. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that hit hard.